You're standing at the edge of a river, and every animal there just froze. Not because they saw you, because they smelled you. A herd of horses that were drinking calmly seconds ago is now bolting in every direction, kicking up dust, screaming in a way horses only scream when something is about to die. You haven't thrown a spear. You haven't moved. You're just standing there, and they're already running like the worst thing in the world just walked into view. That's the part nobody talks about. Ancient humans weren't the strongest predator on the savanna. We didn't have claws long enough to cut a zebra open. We didn't have jaws that could crack a femur, like a lion's. We were slow, soft-skinned, and embarrassingly easy to kill compared to almost everything else standing near that river. And yet, something about us made every predator and prey animal on that landscape treat us like the most dangerous thing alive. Not the fastest, not the strongest, the most dangerous. Why? Here's the question that should bother you. If you dropped a modern human, alone, unarmed, into the middle of the African savanna 40,000 years ago, what would happen? Realistically, most people picture themselves getting torn apart in under a minute. And yet the animals living there at the time didn't see us that way. They saw us the way you'd see a stranger who just walked into a bar radiating something you can't quite name, something that says don't. That gap between how weak we actually were and how terrified we actually seemed is one of the strangest unsolved threads in prehistoric science. And scientists have spent decades trying to explain it. Let's start with the obvious theory, the one you probably already assumed. Weapons, sharpened sticks, flint-tipped spears, eventually bows. Surely that's why animals feared us, because we could kill from a distance, because we figure out how to turn our weakness into lethality through tools. That explanation feels clean. It feels satisfying. It's also incomplete, and here's what scientists actually found when they looked closer. Animal fear of humans shows up in the fossil and behavioral record long before our weapons were good enough to justify that fear. Early hominins were using crude stone tools and blunt wooden implements that, frankly, wouldn't have done much against an adult buffalo or a cave bear. And yet trace evidence, footprint patterns, abandoned kill sites, isotopic analysis of prey bones, suggests large animals were already altering their behavior around early human groups well before spear technology caught up to that level of threat. In other words, animals started fearing us before we'd earned it. That should stop you for a second. Because if it wasn't the weapon that made us scary, what was it? This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because the answer isn't really about tools at all. It's about persistence. Humans are, biologically, some of the worst sprinters in the animal kingdom. A cheetah will outrun you before you've taken 10 steps. A gazelle will vanish over the horizon while you're still catching your breath. But here's the twist almost nobody learns in school. Humans are freakishly good at endurance running, better than almost any other land mammal on Earth, including the animals we hunted. We sweat instead of pant, which means we can shed heat while moving, while our prey can't. A horse has to stop and cool down. We don't. Picture this from the animal's perspective. You're a kudu, a large antelope, moving through open grassland under the midday sun. A human starts following you, not sprinting, not lunging, just walking, then jogging, steady, relentless, never stopping, never speeding up dramatically, never slowing down enough to lose your trail. You run. You put distance between you. You stop to catch your breath because your body overheats fast under that sun. And there it is again, still coming, still walking. Hours pass. Your legs are shaking. Your body temperature is climbing toward a dangerous edge. And the human behind you hasn't stopped once. This is called persistence hunting, and it's one of the strangest, most psychologically disturbing survival strategies in the animal kingdom, because it isn't about strength. It's about patience turned into a weapon. Anthropologists who studied hunter-gatherer groups still practicing this method today, in places like the Kalahari, describe hunts that last 4 or 5, even 6 hours, ending not with dramatic chase, but with animals simply collapsing from heat exhaustion, unable to run another step, while the human calmly walks up and finishes it. No claws needed, no fangs needed, just time, heat, and an unwillingness to stop. Now here's where this connects to something inside you, right now, today. That same trait, the ability to endure discomfort long after everyone else quits. didn't disappear when we stopped hunting antelope. It's the same trait that lets people finish marathons their bodies are screaming at them to abandon. It's the same trait behind the business person who outlasts every competitor not by being smarter, but by simply refusing to stop showing up. Psychologists have a name for it now, grit, but your ancestors weren't calling it grit. They were calling it dinner. But here's what scientists actually found that complicates this even further. Endurance alone doesn't explain the sheer terror animals seem to feel around humans, because plenty of other endurance predators exist: wolves, African wild dogs, and prey animals don't panic around them with quite the same intensity researchers have documented around early human presence. So there had to be something else stacked on top of the running. Something that made us worse than just persistent. That something is coordination. And this is where the story stops being about individual toughness and becomes something much colder. A lion hunts as a unit, sure, but it's a unit built on instinct, on inherited behavior patterns passed down through generations of pride structure. What humans developed was different. It was communicated, planned, adapted in real time. Early humans didn't just chase prey. They predicted it. They'd split into groups, some driving an animal toward a specific point, others waiting there in ambush, timing their movements based on terrain, wind direction, and the specific panic patterns of the species they were hunting. This wasn't instinct. This was strategy, built and rebuilt every single hunt based on what worked last time. Animals evolved over millions of years to read threat through fixed patterns, a certain gait, a certain posture, a certain smell. Humans broke that code entirely because we didn't hunt the same way twice. And an unpredictable predator is infinitely more terrifying than a predictable one, because prey can't evolve defenses against a threat that keeps changing its own rules. Think about that for a second, because it's not just a biology fact. It's a mirror. The animals weren't just afraid of our stamina or our spears. They were afraid of our minds, of the fact that we could learn from a failed hunt and come back smarter. No other predator on that landscape could do that at scale. A lion that fails a hunt tries again the same way. A human that fails a hunt goes back to camp and changes the plan. Here's hook 2, and this is where everything you think you know about ancient humans starts to crack. We've been taught to imagine our ancestors as scrappy underdogs, barely surviving, hiding from predators, clawing out an existence at the bottom of the food chain. That image is largely wrong. By the time humans had fire, coordinated hunting, and basic weapon technology, we weren't prey trying to survive predators. We were something predators were actively trying to avoid. There's a term researchers use for this shift, and it's blunt. Humans became a super predator, and not in the poetic sense. In the mathematically documented sense. Studies analyzing predation rates across ecosystems found a human hunting pressure on adult prey animals, particularly large mammals, vastly outpace the rates seen from any natural predator, including lions, wolves, and bears combined. We weren't hunting like an animal among animals. We were hunting like something the ecosystem had never encountered before, and prey species noticed. Fast. This is where things get genuinely eerie, because the fear response researchers have documented in modern prey animals toward human scent and human presence is disproportionately extreme compared to their fear response toward actual natural predators. In controlled studies playing recorded human voices versus lion roars near watering holes in Africa, animals, including large, dangerous ones like elephants and rhinos, fled significantly faster and farther from human voices than from lion sounds. Let that sink in. Animals evolved over millions of years. Animals that could be casually killed by a lion were more afraid of human voice than the actual apex predator that hunts them daily. That fear isn't cultural. It isn't learned in a single generation. Researchers believe it's evolutionary, baked into instinct over tens of thousands of years, a kind of species-wide trauma response passed down because the animals that didn't fear humans enough simply didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. Now sit with that for a second, because it means something uncomfortable. It means, on some level, we are wired into the nervous systems of animals across the planet as the worst thing they can encounter. Worse than lions. Worse than crocodiles. Us. So what did that fear actually look like practically on the ground 40,000 years ago? It looked like entire ecosystems reorganizing themselves around human presence. Large herbivores shifted grazing patterns to avoid areas with human activity, even at the cost of worse food sources. Predators that once dominated regions began avoiding zones with consistent human traffic, ceding territory not through direct confrontation, but through simple avoidance, the same way you'd avoid a street you know is dangerous, without ever needing to see the danger yourself. This is called the landscape of fear in ecological research, and it's one of the most quietly devastating concepts in prehistoric science, because it means our mere presence, not our hunting, not our weapons, just our existence in space, was enough to reshape how every other species on Earth behaved. That's not something claws do. That's not something fangs do. That's something only a truly dominant, deeply unpredictable force does to an ecosystem. And here's the second time this connects to you. Right now. Ever walked into a room and felt the energy shift before anyone said a word? Ever notice how certain people don't need to raise their voice to make a room go quiet? That instinct, reading dominance through presence alone, isn't some modern social skill. It's ancient. It's the same wiring that once told a gazelle to bolt before a human even lifted a weapon. We're now at the halfway point of this story, and here's where it gets genuinely disturbing, because what you're about to hear was largely left out of mainstream history books, glossed over in favor of the tidier, more comfortable narrative about early humans as humble foragers living in harmony with nature. The uncomfortable truth is this: humans didn't just hunt effectively. We hunted too effectively. And the fossil record shows the consequences in a way that should genuinely unsettle you. Across nearly every continent humans migrated into, a strange and consistent pattern shows up shortly after our arrival. Massive extinctions of large animals. Megafauna, species that survived ice ages, climate shifts, and natural predator pressure for hundreds of thousands of years, only to vanish within a few thousand years of humans showing up. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, enormous flightless birds, giant kangaroos in Australia, woolly rhinos, one after another, gone, on a timeline that lines up disturbingly well with human arrival, not with any climate event severe enough to explain the scale of the die-off. For decades, scientists debated whether climate change or human hunting caused this wave of extinctions, sometimes called a quaternary extinction event. But here's what scientists actually found when they dug deeper into the timeline data across multiple continents. In regions where humans arrived earlier, megafauna died off earlier. In regions humans reached later, like parts of the Arctic and remote islands, megafauna survived longer, sometimes by thousands of years, until the moment humans finally showed up there too. The extinctions weren't following climate patterns. They were following us, like a shadow. Think about the sheer weight of that. We're talking about a relatively small, physically unremarkable species, walking into environments that had stabilized their predator-prey relationships over hundreds of thousands of years, and within a geological blink unraveling them completely, not with technology anywhere close to what we have now, with sharpened sticks, coordinated group strategy, fire, and an unwillingness to ever stop the pursuit. This is a third connection to modern psychology, and it's the darkest one. That same drive, the refusal to stop, the compulsion to pursue past the point most species would quit, didn't just make us effective hunters. It made us dangerously effective, to a degree we apparently couldn't self-regulate, even when the cost was wiping out species faster than they could recover. Sound familiar? It should. It's the same pattern researchers point to when discussing modern overconsumption, overfishing, deforestation. We don't just take what we need. We're wired to keep taking long after enough would have made sense to any other species on the planet. That instinct kept us alive on the savanna. It's a genuinely unsettling thing to realize it might still be running the show today. Now, let's push into the final stretch, because this is where the story gets even darker, and where the real answer to why were animals terrified of us reveals something most people never consider. It wasn't just that we killed efficiently. It's that we killed in ways no animal brain was evolved to predict or defend against. Consider fire. To every other species on that landscape, fire was chaos, an uncontrollable force that meant flee immediately or die. Humans didn't just survive fire. We domesticated it. We carried it. We used it as a tool of war against the landscape itself, burning brush to drive herds toward waiting hunters, using flame as a weapon no claw or fawn could counter, no evolved defense could anticipate. Imagine being an animal whose entire defensive instinct set was built around running from natural threats, only to discover this particular threat could conjure the single most catastrophic natural disaster on command and point it directly at you. Consider traps. Pit traps, deadfalls, snares, devices that kill without the predator even needing to be present. To an animal's brain, evolved to associate danger with a visible threat it could see, smell, or hear. This must have been almost incomprehensible. Death arriving from nowhere, triggered by your own movement, with no predator in sight to fight or flee from. That's not a hunting method an antelope's nervous system had any evolutionary framework to process. There was no ancestral memory to draw on, no instinct that said, watch for this. It was a completely novel category of threat, and prey species were being killed by something they couldn't even properly perceive as danger until it was already too late. And here's the detail that tends to disturb people most when they really sit with it. Unlike every other predator on the savanna, humans didn't just kill for food. Evidence from ancient kill sites shows patterns of hunting that go beyond caloric necessity, instances where far more animals were killed in a single event than could possibly be consumed or preserved, entire herds driven off cliffs in mass kill events, hundreds of animals dying in minutes. Some researchers argue this reflects surplus strategy, killing more than needed during rare high-yield opportunities to stockpile for lean seasons. But others point to something more unsettling, evidence that humans, uniquely among predators, sometimes hunted beyond necessity, driven by something close at opportunity, or even, some argue, a kind of primal thrill response wired into a brain that evolved to reward successful hunting with intense neurological satisfaction, regardless of whether the kill was strictly needed. That's the piece that should make you pause and look inward for a second, because that same neurological reward circuit, the dopamine hit tied to pursuit, to catching, to winning against something that tried to escape, didn't vanish when we stopped needing to hunt for survival. It's still sitting in your skull right now. It's part of why competitive sports feel so satisfying. It's part of why the chase, in almost any form, activates something primal in the human brain that logic alone can't fully explain. So when you ask why animals were terrified of ancient human hunters, the honest answer isn't a single trait. It wasn't just our stamina, though that mattered. It wasn't just our coordination, though that mattered more. It wasn't just our tools or our fire or our traps. It was a combination of all of it, wrapped around a mind that never stopped adapting, never stopped strategizing, and, most disturbingly, didn't always stop once the need was satisfied. Animals across an entire planet, across wildly different ecosystems and continents that had never made contact with each other, converge on the exact same instinctive response to our species. Run first. Ask questions never. That kind of universal fear doesn't happen by accident. It happens because, for a very long time, on nearly every landscape we touched, we earned it. And maybe that's the real closing thought we're sitting with. We like to imagine ourselves as the vulnerable ones in nature's story, the fragile species that needed protecting from a dangerous world. But for most of the animal kingdom, for tens of thousands of years, across every continent we set foot on, we weren't the ones who needed protecting. We were the reason nothing else felt safe.